Welcome everyone to our memorial service here in Singapore for Steve. I have the privilege, I guess, to be first up to share a few words about Begs, who is someone I'm extremely fortunate to be able to have coached rugby with, played rugby with, like many of you in the room, and I think most of all can say was one of the most trusted friends that I had in a fairly short space of time. So, background, Steve was born in Chatham in Kent on Friday the 4th of April 1975. He weighed in at a light 10 pounds 4 ounce, right? So I think that set the scene for where he ended up. On that day, the hit song in the charts, both in the US and the UK, was a song called Loving You, which I think is fairly appropriate on this occasion tonight. It was also one of the days, that the great philanthropist, which was Bill Gates, started the Microsoft business. You might wonder why I mentioned that, but there's clearly no resemblance in bank balance between Bill Gates and Begs, but they did share a really similar mindset, right? And it wasn't about Steve donating his wealth, but he donated all of his time, he donated all of his smiles, and he certainly donated all of his energy to everyone who crossed paths with the big man. He had an innate ability, whenever he was around, to be present, which is a tough thing to say for many of us. Sometimes a little bit too close. For those of you who knew him well, Steve didn't really understand how to assess the concept of personal space. Steve left us all just 17 days ago. Worked it out, it's only a little over 2 kilometres away behind me here on Sunday the 10th of September. And as you'll see on the memorial table and up on the screen now, he left us doing one of the things he loved the most, which was playing sport, competing, and being in or near the ocean, which many of us from the rugby community probably didn't realise. So tonight, while we all miss Steve, and many of us can't fathom he's gone, let's all remember him for the one-of-a-kind individual that he was. While we no doubt all grieve him in our own way, I ask that tonight we honour and celebrate his action-packed life and his amazing spirit. For those of you who know me, I always have a last word, and before I go, I do have a last word, but it's not mine. And I've stolen the words of one of America's and the world's greatest poets, which is Henry Wordsworth Longfellow, who was described in terms that are uncanny when we think of Begs. He was described as a man of absolute sweetness and simplicity, one of absolute modesty and bearing a sweet and beautiful soul. And here's what Henry wrote over 200 years ago. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and in departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Rest in peace, Steve. You'll never be forgotten by anyone here. Before we go any further, as Steve would have wanted, there's 100 shots of whiskey. We just wanted to raise our glasses in honour of Steve. Rest in peace to Begs. Begs.
Stephen Begley, Beggars, Begs. A true giant of a man in every sense. Physically, obviously a big boy, but way beyond that, a massive personality, a great teammate, a colleague, and of course, a great friend. A guy who just had a fantastic thirst for fun and life that was probably only managed by his own fantastic thirst in his own right. He was hugely loved by not only all of us here tonight, but by so many around the world. I'm truly humbled to be asked to say a few words tonight. But I'm also very aware that there's nothing I can really say that's going to do him justice. Quite simply, he was a great, great bloke. I know how keenly and vividly we've all felt his passing, and yet in some ways this pain is a good indicator of what a great man he was and what a positive impact he had on all of us. The way that so many people have pulled together has also been just humbling. Truly the huge outpouring of love and emotion, whether it's the ridiculous amount of WhatsApp messages on the Bucks Vets group, the way that everyone's just running together, it's been inspirational. There are those that deserve a special mention. Firstly, Nigel and Erica from St James's have been just beyond brilliant. And I know Nigel's had his own issues recently, but just absolutely amazing. There's a story that Beg's had 2 women in his life in Singapore at the moment. His housemate Paul, who sadly can't be with us tonight, he's already back in Scotland. And Vanessa, who has been just amazing considering the situation. Finally, to Claude, bring on tonight, and Miles and all the Bucks boys, Eeks and Jace, thank you very much. It's something that you know Beggs himself would have loved and been incredibly proud of. He would have loved the emotion, the camaraderie, and he should have fucking loved the free bar. He would have loved some of the press, especially in the Scottish press. Not only did they call him a rugby star, but more importantly, they said he only weighed 110 kilos. They said he was a regular triathlete who completed numerous other triathlons before. Suddenly, you know, he would have had this placed in pride of place. How to encompass all of Beggs in a short speech? There were literally so many fantastic aspects and adventures of his life, and at literally every turn, there was an inexhaustible number of stories and tales. So please excuse me tonight that I don't talk about his rugby career, as established and successful as it was. I'm not going to go about his working life. I'm not even going to talk about how the global use of Tinder fell remarkably when he started dating Vanessa. These, I hope, will be the backbones of wonderful time spent reminiscing about Begley tales. Tonight instead, and if you permit me, I'd like to simply talk about Beggs the friend. Personally, I first met Beggs around, or shortly before, 2000. We were playing for a team called the Scottish Exiles. Since his death, I've spent a long time trying to work out and understand why Beggs and I remained in contact throughout this time. Not that he wasn't a great guy, because we all know he was a great guy, but our paths never really kind of crossed. Truth be told, it was only very late last night that the penny really dropped. And I realised it wasn't me and Beggs, it was simply Beggs. Whilst he was the one guy I'd remain in touch with of that team, I'm sure there were many others that also had the link with Beggs. So many folk who, despite time and distance, it just felt so natural and normal to pick up the phone and hear, "Hey mate, it's Beggs." One thing we'll all agree with is he was just a remarkably genuine guy. And whilst many of us knew him, the straight up and down guy he was, there's also no doubting that he was blessed with an incredibly high EQ. You simply don't have that huge amount of friends in such a diverse areas and make that impact on life and people without it. He was a guy you could literally put with anyone, any group of people, and in no time he would have struck up an enduring friendship. Beggs loved people. People loved Beggs. He had a seemingly endless ability to both acquire and keep friends. With Beggs, the metaphorical door of friendship was always very wide open. He was fantastic at staying in touch. Admittedly, this would be part catching up and part trying to sell you something, or looking at an angle or a business proposition. However, when the chips were down, he was really a guy you could rely on. I know many here tonight will feel an enduring gratitude to him for the friendship that he showed and the comfort he gave others during tough time. And yet, he himself was a remarkably constant guy. And what do I mean by that? Well, he always maintained a consistently and ever-present positive air and exuberance. Nothing seemed to unduly worry him. Nothing bothered him too much. I honestly can't remember meeting him and thinking, shit, Beg's in a bad mood today. Sure, maybe stuff annoyed him and he had no issue in airing it when it did, but he never held grudges or ill will. He was a guy who was always amongst it, centre of it, and loved it. He'd love the quiet comment, the little dig, the joke, but again, it was always in jest and good humour, and there was never, ever malice intent. He was just a good man. For many here tonight, Beggs will perhaps also remain the ultimate paradox. A proud Scotsman with the most English of accents, a guy with an unparalleled EQ who had literally no idea or understanding of personal space, a guy who'd as soon thump you on the rugby field and share a beer with you after, a monster of a man, yet a man blessed with a remarkable tender and loving side. I've spoken to many of you since his death, and this kind of Begley dichotomy still exists. When the overwhelming sadness of his death does take toll, and it's almost immediately accompanied by a Begley memory or snippet that brings the involuntary smile or laugh. Tears have run freely, but these two emotional imposters have been side by side. For so many of us here tonight, it's completely incomprehensible that Beggs isn't here. In death, people often talk about loss and feeling of a hole. But for me, this analogy just doesn't quite marry. Beggs couldn't have caused a hole or in any way detracted from life. No, he was the polar opposite of this. He was a value-add guy at every juncture. He made life bigger. He made life better. He made life brighter. And he made life more fun for all of us. So whilst he's gone, and gone far, far too early, his wonderful positive influence will be forever missed, never forgotten, and always cherished. Whilst the sadness and pain of Steve's passing is palpable, it directly correlates to how much of a wonderful and positive impact he had on us all. Ladies and gentlemen, it's only appropriate that I finish by asking you to all raise your glasses for another toast. To our wonderful friend Steve Begley. Rest in peace, big man. You're going to be forever missed. Thanks.
Thanks.
Everyone, thanks again for being here as we celebrate the life of a one Stephen Begley, or Beggs, or Beggars. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to say a few words to honor the big man. Because, let's face it, Steve was a big unit. And people say that big things come from small beginnings. But not Steve. That's a big baby. So when Fergus Gladstone told me he was going to introduce me to a guy who stood tall at 194 centimeters, I had my doubts. Because, guys, midgets, they just don't date giants. You know, it doesn't happen. I mean, how does that even work, right? But I decided to meet Steve, and it turns out it was one of the best, if not the best, decisions I've ever made. Was it love at first sight? Debatable. But Steve found his way into my cold and callous heart, and next thing you knew, I was crazy head over heels, gaga over Steve. But with this bizarre love triangle that we had going on with Paul, the playboy, Malloy, his housemate and work wife, and Mark McGuire, who looked up to Steve like his very own big brother, and the hundreds of tributes that flew in at the news of his passing, and the sheer amount of grown men he made cry, I realized I wasn't the only one crazy guy got head over heels over Steve. But why was that exactly? He was a gentle soul. Wanted her to fly. He was a sexy beast, yeah? Really attractive with, I have to say, impeccable fashion sense. Are those fried eggs on his shorts? He took joy in life's simple pleasures, such as a good meal, the occasional beer or two. He didn't drink much. He wasn't afraid to try new things, even though he probably wasn't any good at them. He was also an intellectual scholar, always pondering life's most pressing and important questions. He was an excellent role model. I believe that was paraphrased. And he probably would have made a good father figure. But jokes aside, Steve was just, as Bert and Claude mentioned, just a real, genuine stand-up guy. He was all about building that relationship. You know, he could, and he would, talk to anyone. No one was safe. But he passed no judgment. He wanted nothing more than to make your acquaintance and enjoy the pleasure of your company and just make that connection. He was also kind. One of the kindest, most generous men I've had the honor of knowing. Always willing to help, unconditionally. Now, whether you wanted or needed that help or advice was irrelevant, you'd get it anyway. And he would always lend his shoulder to anyone who needed it. Steve was a great friend to many. And he would never, ever leave his team. He was a loving uncle to Neve and Aaron, brother to Matt and to Claire, and a doting son to Jackie and Frank. And to me, he was just Steve. Best partner I could have ever wished for. Best man, really. He was my rock, and I'm so lucky and so proud that he gave me that chance to be a part of his life. And as generous as he was in his life, he gave me a very wonderful gift. He showed me just how beautiful and how happy life could be if you let it. And while he leaves a great, big, gaping void in all of our lives, he has enriched us all. So please, if you have a glass, raise your glass to Steve and thank him. Thank him for his gifts of love, friendship, and just a whole lot of funny stories to last us a lifetime. Thank you, Steve. We love you, and you'll be dearly missed. To Steve. Thank you.
So I have the privilege of reading Matt Begley's words this evening. Matt is Steve's older brother. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. The funeral is in 2 days' time, so he's obviously looking after all the arrangements in England and Scotland. To put it into context, we first met Matt 2 weeks ago. Obviously, we all heard the terrible news. Matt flew in to look after the body and fly back with Steve's body to the UK. And it was the privilege of us to actually meet Matt for a couple of days. He hadn't actually visited Singapore before, his sister had, but this was the first time. So obviously it was under strained circumstances, but no, I came late on Tuesday night. We were in Muddy's having a few beers, and I came late flying in. Walked into the bar, and I instantly saw Matt. He was he was standing at 6'4", much bigger than the Begley, and we had I think a thoroughly enjoyable evening. It was emotional. It was hard. It was aggressive sometimes, and he could drink more than Begley, unfortunately. So the next day was horrible. But for us, we really enjoyed a couple of days with Matt, and he's very kindly, obviously apologises for not being here today, but he's very kindly written a few words which I have the honour to try and do my best with, especially after following wonderful words from Ferg and Van. So here we go. On behalf of my parents, Jackie and Frank, my sister Claire, and myself, I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks for the love, comfort, and support that Bucks Rugby and the Singapore community have given since the passing of my brother, Steve Begley. I think it is fair to say that Steve touched many people's lives, particularly in the rugby community, where he was a role model to many young, aspiring men and women rugby players. Mourn him certainly, but be comforted by the fact that his life was lived to the full and without regret. Personally, I have lost a brother, but I have been reminded by the actions, thoughts and works of others that I have many brothers, and for that I am truly thankful. Steve would have smiled cheekily and been a little embarrassed if he was here to witness the outpouring his death has provoked. I am indeed humbled to be able to say that I knew him all his life. He was one of the good guys. Go well, and rest in peace, dear brother.
Hello everybody. I'm very honoured to be able to say a few words on behalf of Steve. Just echoing what Matt said, he'd be very proud, he'd be very honoured, slightly humbled to see the outpouring of grief and emotion that everybody's had over the last couple of weeks. I'm extremely proud to be part of a community that, in tough times, pulls together, says, what do you need? Let's do it, let's get it done. It's been amazing to witness the last couple of weeks how everybody's pulled together, and I think that's indicative of how much Steve meant to everybody. As you can see by the crosscut of the community here tonight, Begs was respected for a lot of things. We knew Begs from various parts of our life. You know, some of you from the office, some of us from rugby, all of us from copious amounts of drinking and laughs at the pub. That's one of the things that I can always remember Begs for. If he was at the pub, I knew I was going to be late, I knew I was going to have a good time, and I was going to have a sore stomach the next morning from laughing. Begs had three sides to him. He was a polite, professional gentleman who was great at networking, really strong EQ. He was a lovable giant. As previously mentioned, he was a close talker. He would get to within 2 inches of your face to tell a story. He had many stories. He would generally start the story with a tap on your chest, moving about 2 inches away from your face and saying, hey, 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 I have a mate who, I have a mate who. Never short of stories. But there's one part of Begs that some of us got to see. There's this angry little Scottish fucker. When he got on the pitch, something happened. You could see the glaze go over his eyes. I remember one game we were playing Wanderers, and one of the opposition, I think it was the opposite number 8, was giving back chat, and I just said, mate, wrong guy. Pick anyone else, just not him. You could see Beggs' eyes. We had a scrum immediately after, and it was decontested, so no pushing. I was second row, Beggs was number 8. I felt like a piano accordion, he was pushing that hard. We won a penalty, so we were sitting there thinking, do we go for touch? Do we go for a penalty goal? Nope. Beggs takes the tap, looks around, finds the guy, runs all the way out to the wing, dives straight at the guy's chest, knocks him over, scores a try. So we said, okay, we'll take the try and the conversion instead. So that guy was now, he's a speed hump. Beggs is one of the good guys. The world was a better place for having Beggs in it, even for too short of a time. We are all better off from knowing Beggs, even from too short a time. So if you can, and this is going to be a theme of the night, please take your glasses. I'd like to make a toast. 2-finger drink. To Beggs, the gentleman. Rest in peace, bro.
Firstly, I'd like to say, Beggs, you're a fucking idiot. You've managed to make 7 adults stand up in front of a room of people and burst into tears. I have no doubt you'll be sat with a pint in hand, ciggy in the other, having a quiet chuckle. Or probably more likely, being very amused by the whole situation. I'm not going to say too much. You've heard a lot from everyone else, what a great man Beggs was. It is truly an honour to call you a friend. I personally want to thank you for the support you have provided me over the last few years, even if you did encroach on my personal space on every occasion. You do claim to be Scottish, but we all know your roots are in Kent, and for the Garden of England to have produced such greats as you and I is a testament to the greatest county in England. I will miss those discussions. I'd like to say thank you to everyone that has turned up this evening. all the messages of support and condolences we've received from all over the world, not just to Bucks RFC, but to everyone that knew Beggs, which I actually believe is half the world. God, that man could talk. In closing, I'd like to mention that Bucks RFC have got a first Bex game of the league season this weekend, which we are calling the Begley Memorial Game. It would be great to see a number of you down there to support and just live in the memory of Mr. Steve Begley. Now, if there's one thing that Beggs would have wanted more than anything else, is for everyone to have a proper knees up. He knew how to party with the best of them, and it would be only right on this occasion that we follow his lead. So please raise a glass to Mr. Steve Begley. Close, close. You'll be forever missed. We will meet again. Now we're going to go and get loose, because that is what you would have wanted. Now finish your fucking drink.